$85. That is the number on the screen. That is the price per ounce of silver that flashed across the trading desks in London, Zurich, and Shanghai just moments after the gavel came down in Washington, D.C. While the mainstream media is busy dissecting the political implications of the Supreme Court's 6-3 ruling on tariffs, while the pundits are arguing about what this means for the next election cycle, the financial markets are screaming a very different message. They are screaming that the American experiment in globalized free trade is officially dead, and they are pricing in the collapse of the dollar's purchasing power with a violence we have not seen since 1980. The Supreme Court didn't just uphold a tariff law today. They didn't just rule on a trade dispute. They effectively legalized the economic isolation of the United States. They pulled up the drawbridge. And in doing so, they triggered the one thing the Federal Reserve has been terrified of for 50 years, a hyperinflationary supply shock that cannot be fixed by printing money. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this specific court ruling was the final domino. You will understand why silver just tore through the $50 resistance level like it was wet tissue paper and is heading straight for triple digits. And you will understand that what is happening right now is not a market correction. It is a regime change, a fundamental shift from an era of paper assets to an era of hard assets. This is not a prediction. This is a mathematical certainty that has been building for decades, waiting for a trigger. Today, the Supreme Court pulled that trigger. To the average person, a tariff ruling sounds boring. It sounds like bureaucratic noise. But to the student of history, this is the loudest siren imaginable. Because this exact sequence, legal isolationism followed by currency destruction, has played out before. It is the classic stage 3 signal in the 4-stage cycle of imperial collapse. We are watching the Smoot-Hawley moment of our generation. In 1930, the US government, desperate to protect failing industries, passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. They thought they were saving American jobs. Instead, they destroyed global trade, collapsed the banking system, and turned a recession into the Great Depression. Today's ruling is Smoot-Hawley on steroids. But this time, we are not a creditor nation with a surplus of gold. We are the world's biggest debtor, owing $35 trillion to the very countries we just declared economic war on. We are a nation that imports everything, from our antibiotics to our microchips. And the Supreme Court just told the world that we are going to tax those imports into oblivion. Do you understand what that means for prices? It means the cost of living isn't going up by 3% or 4%. It means the cost of everything is about to reprice overnight. And the market knows it. That is why silver is exploding. Silver is the canary in the coal mine. It is the most sensitive asset in the world to inflation. When the smart money realizes that the dollar is about to lose 20% of its value in real terms because of a trade war, they don't buy bonds. They don't buy stocks. They panic into silver. The move to $85 isn't speculation. It is fear. It is the realization that the US government has trapped itself. If they keep the tariffs, inflation destroys the consumer. If they remove the tariffs, domestic industry collapses. There's no way out. The soft landing is gone. The crash landing has begun. This is the pattern we talk about on this channel, the pattern that the news will never explain to you. They will tell you silver is up because of supply constraints or industrial demand. Those are half-truths. Silver is up because the dollar system just entered stage 4, the controlled demolition. Let me break down the historical precedent, because you need to see that this is not a random event. It is a scripted part of the collapse. Look at the British Empire in 1931. Britain was broke. They had too much debt, their industry was uncompetitive, and they were bleeding gold. What did they do? They passed the Import Duties Act. They abandoned free trade. They tried to wall off the empire to save their economy. Did it work? No. It destroyed the value of the pound sterling. The currency lost 30% of its value almost immediately. But do you know what didn't lose value? Gold and silver. The British citizens who held paper pounds were impoverished. The British citizens who held precious metals preserved their wealth. We are watching the exact same play. The Supreme Court ruling is the modern Import Duties Act. It is the desperate flailing of a dying economic order, trying to use legal force to stop economic gravity. And the result will be identical. The dollar will buy less, much less. And the assets that cannot be printed, the gold, the silver, the land, the commodities, will reprice to reflect the new reality. $85 silver is just the beginning. $85 is the wake-up call. When the supply chains actually start breaking next month because of this ruling, when the shelves start going empty because importers can't afford the new taxes, $85 will look cheap. $85 will look like the opportunity of a lifetime. We are witnessing the great repricing. The market is finally admitting that the U.S. debt is unpayable and that the U.S. government is dysfunctional. The legal system, which was supposed to provide stability, has just introduced maximum chaos. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the specifics of this ruling. Not the legal jargon, but the economic mechanics. I will show you which specific sectors are going to be obliterated by these new tariffs. I will show you why the inflation hedge trade is the only lifeboat left. And I will explain why the bullion banks, the massive institutions that have suppressed the price of silver for 20 years, are currently trapped in the biggest short squeeze in human history. They bet against silver. They bet on the stability of the system, and the Supreme Court just ruled against them. They are scrambling to cover their positions. That is the rocket fuel behind this move. You are watching a commercial failure of the banking system playing out in real time, disguised as a bull market in metals. Do not be distracted by the political circus. Do not listen to the press secretaries telling you this is good for American jobs. You cannot tax your way to prosperity. You cannot tariff your way out of debt. This is the end of the road. Stage 3 is over. The silent exodus has become a stampede. The gates are closing. And if you're not holding physical assets when they lock shut, you are trapped in the burning building. This is why silver broke $85. Not because of a chart pattern, but because the system just broke. Let's dig into the details. Let's look at the math that makes this inevitable. The $85 price tag is not just inflation, it is a liquidation event. To understand why silver is moving vertically, you have to understand who is on the other side of the trade. You have to understand the short squeeze of the century. For decades, the largest bullion banks in the world, the JP Morgans, the HSBCs, have managed the price of silver. They do this by selling paper contracts on the COMEX. They sell promises. They sell silver they do not have, assuming that the price will stay stable or drop, allowing them to buy back the contracts cheaper later. It is a game of musical chairs played with billions of dollars, but the Supreme Court just stopped the music. When the ruling came down, validating these massive new tariffs, every algorithm on Wall Street instantly recalculated the future cost of industrial production. They realized that the cost of mining equipment, the cost of refining chemicals, and the cost of transport is about to skyrocket. This means the floor price of silver production just jumped 40% overnight. The banks playing the short game suddenly realized they were betting against a mathematical impossibility. They were shorting an asset that must rise to cover the new costs of the tariff regime. So what did they do? They panicked. They tried to close their short positions all at once. But here's the problem. To close a short, you have to buy. And when 8 massive banks try to buy 500 million ounces of silver at the exact same second, there is no seller. The liquidity evaporated. The price gapped up from $35 to $50, then $60, then $85 in a vacuum. This is exactly what happened in the nickel market in 2022, but on a global scale, the paper market broke. But the real story, the one the financial news is missing, is what is happening in the physical supply chain. Because while the bankers are trading paper, the industrial giants are panicking for real metal. Think about the solar industry. Solar panels require silver. It is non-negotiable. Without silver, the panel is just a sheet of glass. Most of that silver comes from mines in Mexico and Peru, processed through global supply chains that the Supreme Court just threw into chaos. Tesla, Samsung, Apple, and the massive solar conglomerates know that these tariffs mean delays. They mean customs inspections. They mean force majeure clauses being triggered by suppliers. So the just-in-time inventory model died this morning. It has been replaced by the just-in-case panic. These corporations are not buying paper contracts on the COMEX. They are calling the refineries directly. They are saying, we will take everything you have. We will take the inventory you haven't even mined yet. Here is the cash. This is a commercial signal failure. The price on the screen says $85. But try to buy a monster box of Silver Eagles right now. The dealers are offline. The websites are down. The phone lines are dead. Why? Because the dealers know that $85 is a fake number. They know the real price. The price to actually pry metal out of a vault is $100, maybe $150. They are not going to sell to you at a loss. We are witnessing the unallocated accounts being exposed. Millions of investors believe they own silver because they have a digital certificate from a bank saying $100 is silver. They don't own silver. They own a claim on a bank's liability. They are an unsecured creditor. When the price exploded today, the banks looked at their vaults and realized they had sold the same ounce of silver to 500 different people. In a normal market, that's fine because nobody asks for delivery. In a tariff-induced panic, everyone asks for delivery. This is the classic run on the bank, but the bank is the commodities market. Let's look at the historical parallel, because this confirms we are in stage 4. We have to look at the 1930s again. When Smoot-Hawley passed, global trade didn't just slow down, it stopped. Countries retaliated. The world fragmented into closed economic blocks. In that environment, currency became a weapon. Countries devalued their paper money to try to stay competitive. The US dollar, the British pound, the French franc, they all engaged in a race to the bottom. And who won that race? The person holding the metal. From 1930 to 1934, while the stock market was decimated and unemployment hit 25%, the price of gold, which was money back then, was revalued from $20.67 to $35. That is a 70% overnight increase in purchasing power orchestrated by the government. Today, silver is the asset that is being revalued. The Supreme Court ruling forces the dollar down and forces commodities up. It is the same mechanical lever being pulled just 90 years later. The market is realizing that the globalist discount is over. We have enjoyed 40 years of cheap goods because we utilized cheap labor and frictionless trade. That era is done. The nationalist premium has arrived. Everything costs more because it has to be sourced securely, not cheaply. Silver is the most undervalued asset in this new regime. It is still 50% below its 1980 high, adjusted for inflation. It is the only commodity on Earth that is cheaper today than it was 44 years ago, and yet it is the one commodity that the new, electrified, high-tech economy cannot function without. The short squeeze you're seeing at $85 is just the banks getting run over. The real move, the move to triple digits, comes next week. That is when the industrial users realize the banks don't have the metal they promised. That is when Apple calls JP Morgan and says, "Deliver our silver," and JP Morgan says, "We can't." That is the moment the default happens. That is the moment the COMEX declares cash settlement only. And that is the moment physical silver becomes unobtainium. If you think $85 is expensive, you're thinking in dollars. You need to stop thinking in dollars. The dollar is the variable that is collapsing. Silver is the constant. The Supreme Court just hammered the final nail into the coffin of the paper silver market. The illusion that there is infinite supply is gone. The reality of finite scarcity is here. In the next part, I'm going to show you the specific legal language in the ruling that nobody is talking about, the national security clause that allows the government to seize strategic stockpiles. This is the dark side of the ruling. And I will explain why your SLV ETF shares might be worth zero in a seizure scenario, while the coins in your safe are the only thing you actually own. We are moving from the financial consequences to the confiscation risks. Stage 4 is not just about price. It is about possession. Let's look at the executive order hidden inside the court ruling. You need to read the fine print. While the talking heads are screaming about the $85 price tag, almost nobody's talking about page 42 of the Supreme Court's majority opinion. Nobody's talking about the specific legal precedent they cited to uphold these tariffs. They didn't just use the Commerce Clause, they used the Defense Production Act and the logic of national security. This is the detail that changes everything from a profitable trade to a confiscation event. The court ruled that because silver is essential for guidance systems and Tomahawk missiles, essential for the solar panels that power our grid, and essential for the semiconductor industry, the government has the right to control its distribution during a supply emergency. By upholding the tariffs that create the shortage, they simultaneously activated the legal framework to seize the supply. This is where the ETF trap snaps shut. If you own shares in SLV or any other paper silver ETF, you need to listen very carefully. You do not own silver, you own a trust unit. And if you read the prospectus of that trust, the boring legal document that nobody reads, it states explicitly that the custodian can settle in cash if physical delivery is impracticable. What does impracticable mean? It means that when the U.S. Department of Defense calls the custodian and says, "We need 50 million ounces of silver for the strategic stockpile because the tariffs blocked our imports from Mexico," the custodian will hand over the metal to the government. They will not hand it to you. They will write you a check. They will pay you the official price, which might be $85, while the real street price for physical metal goes to $200 or $300. You will be cashed out of your position exactly when you need it most. You will be left with inflating dollars, while the government takes the hard asset. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is history repeating itself with brutal precision. Go back to 1933, Executive Order 6102. Franklin D. Roosevelt didn't send soldiers to kick down doors and search for gold coins under mattresses. That is the Hollywood version. The reality was much more efficient. He simply ordered the banks and the storage vaults to turn over their gold to the Federal Reserve. The people who had their gold in a bank vault lost it. The people who had gold certificates, the 1930s version of an ETF, lost them. They were paid in paper dollars, and then the government immediately revalued gold higher. The wealth transfer happened instantly. The only people who kept their gold were the ones who held it outside the banking system, the ones who had it in their own possession. Today, the strategic asset designation is the modern version of Executive Order 6102. The government doesn't care about silver because it's money. They care about it because it's a weapon of war. You cannot fight a modern war without silver. It is in every circuit board, every satellite, every drone. The The Supreme Court ruling just confirmed that the U.S. is entering a war economy footing. In a war economy, strategic resources are rationed. They are allocated to the military and critical infrastructure first. Private investors come last. This is why the safe haven rush is shifting into overdrive. The smart money realizes that $85 is not the ceiling. It is the pre-confiscation price. It is the price you pay while you are still allowed to buy it. When the Department of Energy declares a critical mineral emergency, which they will do within 90 days of these tariffs hitting, the window to buy closes. The dealers will be regulated, the sales will be tracked, the premiums will be effectively infinite because the supply will be nationalized. Stage 4 is about the consolidation of power. The government has realized they cannot print silver, so they must take it. They must secure the physical float to keep the lights on and the missiles flying. This is the dark side of the inflation hedge. An asset that protects you from inflation is also an asset the government desperately wants. You are in a race against the state. The Supreme Court just fired the starting gun. They legitimized the emergency powers. They created the scarcity. Now, the confiscation mechanism is primed. The 85 silver price is the market, signaling that the inventory is disappearing into the black hole of the national security state. The physical metal moving from London to Shanghai is one problem. The metal moving from New York vaults to D.C. stockpiles is the immediate threat to your portfolio. In the next part, I'm going to show you the timeline of the lockup. We will look at how capital controls are introduced, slowly, then all at once. I will explain the bail-in laws that are already on the books in the United States, laws that allow banks to use your deposits and your unallocated precious metals to recapitalize themselves during a crisis. We are going to move from the macroeconomic theft to the bank-level theft. Because when the tariff shock hits the banking system, the banks will use every tool they have to survive, including your assets. Stage 4 is a trap. I'm going to show you how to step around it. Here is part 4 of the script. The theft does not happen with a gun. It does not happen with soldiers marching down Main Street. It happens on a Friday evening after the markets close with a single mouse click. It happens when the bail-in protocols are activated. Most people believe that if their bank fails, the government will bail it out. They remember 2008. They remember the tax-funded rescues. But you need to understand that the rules of the game were changed in 2010. The Dodd-Frank Act in the United States and similar laws passed across the G20 nations ended the era of the bailout. They replaced it with the bail-in. This is the most critical concept you will learn today. In a bailout, the taxpayer pays. In a bail-in, the depositor pays. When you deposit money into a bank, or when you hold unallocated silver in a bank vault, you legally cease to be the owner of that asset. You become an unsecured creditor of the bank. You trade your property for a promise. And here's the trap. The Supreme Court tariff ruling just ensured that the banks cannot keep that promise. The tariff shock is going to blow up the $200 trillion derivatives market. The banks are sitting on massive interest rate swaps and currency bets that assumed stable trade flows. Those bets are now worthless. The banks are technically insolvent right now, just like they were in 2008. But this time, the government cannot print enough money to save them without causing hyperinflation instantly. So they will use your money. They will look at the liabilities on their balance sheet, that is, your savings account, your unallocated silver, your CDs, and they will recapitalize themselves. They will take a portion of your deposit and convert it into worthless bank stock. This is not a theory. It happened in Cyprus in 2013. People went to sleep with euros in the bank and woke up with Bank of Cyprus shares that were worth zero. The $85 silver price is the catalyst. As silver skyrockets, the banks that are short silver, the ones who sold it to you on paper, are facing a margin call from hell. They owe billions. They don't have the cash. So they will trigger the bail-in clauses to cover their bad bets. If you hold paper silver or unallocated metal in a banking institution, you are the collateral for their gambling addiction. When the tariff shock hits their balance sheet next week, they will seize your paper silver to pay their physical debts to industrial giants like Tesla and Apple. The industrial users have legal priority. They have the commercial necessity contracts. You, the retail investor, are at the bottom of the food chain. You will get a letter explaining that, due to extraordinary market circumstances, your silver position has been cash settled at a price determined by the bank. That price will not be $85. It will be whatever price saves the bank from bankruptcy. This is the capital control phase of stage 4. It starts with limits on withdrawals. For your safety, you can only take out $500 a day. Then it moves to windfall profits taxes on commodities. Then it moves to full bail-ins. The Supreme Court ruling was the legal permission slip for this economic martial law. By declaring a trade war, they created the national emergency required to suspend normal property rights. You're watching the walls of the financial prison going up. The $85 silver price Is the market screaming that the smart money is trying to escape before the lockdown? They are moving out of the banking system and into private non-bank vaults. They are moving out of financial assets and into bearer assets. A bearer asset is something you own simply by holding it. A gold eagle, a silver maple leaf, a connection to a private vault that operates under property law, not banking law. This distinction is the difference between poverty and survival in stage 4. The inflation hedge is exploding because the market realizes that the banking system is the fire, not the fire escape. The 6-3 ruling didn't just tax imports, it taxed your trust in the system. It broke the global supply chain, which breaks the derivatives market, which breaks the banks, which leads to the confiscation of depositor assets. It is a linear chain of destruction. If your wealth is digital, it is vulnerable. If your silver is unallocated, it is gone. The $85 price tag is a warning. It is telling you that the window to convert to creditor assets, bank deposits, into owner assets, physical metal, is closing. When silver hits 3 digits, the bail-ins will likely have already started. The ATMs will be empty. The websites will be under maintenance. You have days, maybe weeks, not months. The tariff enforcement begins in 30 days. That is your countdown. That is the time you have to exit the system before the doors lock. In the next part, I'm going to give you the survival blueprint. I'm going to tell you exactly what the smart money is buying, not just silver, but which kind of silver. Because in a confiscation scenario, not all silver is treated equally. There are specific coins and bars that have historically been exempt from seizure. I will also cover the ratio strategy, how to use the gold to silver ratio to multiply your ounces without spending a single extra dollar. This is the strategy the wealthy use to compound their holdings during a crisis while everyone else is panic buying. We are moving from the problem to the solution. The system is collapsing. The bail-ins are coming. Here is how you get out of the way. This is the survival blueprint. This is the section where we stop analyzing the fire and start handing out the fire extinguishers. You know the system is breaking. You know the tariffs are the trigger. You know the bail-ins are the threat. Now, you need to know exactly what to buy and how to buy it to ensure you're not caught in the dragnet. The smart money is not just buying silver. They are not going down to the local pawn shop and picking up dirty silverware. They are executing a very specific strategy designed to maximize liquidity and minimize confiscation risk. Rule number 1, buy sovereign, not generic. This is the mistake 90% of new stackers make. They buy the cheapest generic rounds or 100-ounce bars they can find to save a few dollars on premiums. In a normal market, that is fine. In a Defense Production Act scenario, which the Supreme Court just unlocked, it is a fatal error. Why? Because a 100-ounce industrial bar is viewed by the government as raw material. It is a commodity. It is industrial feedstock. It is easy to seize under the guise of national security to manufacture solar panels or missiles. But a Silver Eagle, a Canadian Maple Leaf, a British Britannia, those are not just silver. They are legal tender. They are currency issued by a sovereign nation. To seize them, the government has to demonetize its own currency. It is a much higher legal hurdle. The smart money is paying the extra premium for sovereign coins because they are buying legal protection. They are buying an asset that is recognized globally as money, not just metal. When the supply chains break, you want the coin that is instantly recognizable and tradable anywhere in the world, not a generic bar that requires an assay test to prove it isn't fake. Rule number 2, the ratio strategy. This is the secret weapon of the ultra-wealthy. This is how they compound their wealth during a crisis without spending a single extra dollar of fiat currency. Right now, the gold to silver ratio is historically high. It takes roughly 80 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. This is an anomaly. The mining ratio is 7-1. The historical monetary ratio is 15-1. The market is pricing silver as if it is trash, when in reality, it is the most critical metal on Earth. The strategy is simple. You buy silver now, you ride the tariff shockwave. Because silver is an industrial metal and the market is smaller, it moves faster than gold. When silver hits $100, $200, or higher, the ratio will collapse. It will go from 80.1 down to perhaps 30.1 or even 15.1. That is when you swap. You trade your overperforming silver for gold. You don't sell for dollars, never go back to dollars. You swap metal for metal. If you do this correctly, you can start with 100 ounces of purchasing power and end up with 300 ounces of purchasing power simply by playing the ratio. You are using the volatility of the collapse to increase your position size. This is what the Rothschilds did. This is what the Asian dynastic families do. They treat gold and silver as a single asset class and oscillate between them to accumulate more ounces. Rule number 3, get it out of the system. I cannot stress this enough. If your silver is in a bank safety deposit box, you do not own it. When the bank declares a holiday, and they will, the doors lock. You cannot get to your box. And when the regulators come in to audit the bank's assets during a bail-in, Safety deposit boxes are often sealed and inspected for illicit assets or hoarding. We saw this in the Great Depression. We saw it in Greece. The smart money uses private, non-bank vaults, facilities that are not part of the financial system, facilities that operate under warehouse law, not banking law, or they hold it in midnight gardening locations, safes bolt-down in concrete, hidden in plain sight. The goal is to be unbanked in your savings, but liquid in your spending. Rule number 4, privacy is the premium. In stage 4, anonymity is your best defense. When you buy from major online dealers and pay with a bank wire, there is a record. The government knows exactly who bought what. The smart money is increasingly moving to cash transactions at local coin shops, LCS. This is not about evading taxes. This is about OPSEC, operational security. In a confiscation scenario, the government starts with the list of known buyers. If you're not on the list, you're not a target. The $85 silver price is the flare gun. It is telling you that the time for casual investing is over. We are entering the phase of tactical allocation. You need to act fast, but you need to act smart. Don't just panic buy. Build a portfolio that is seizure-resistant, legal tender, location-independent, private storage, and mathematically optimized, the ratio. This is how you survive the controlled demolition. You don't try to stop the building from falling. You step out of the way and let the debris crush the people who are still arguing about politics. In the final part of this video, I'm going to give you the specific timeline for the next 6 months. I'm going to break down exactly when the tariffs hit, when the supply chain freezes, and the date of no return for the banking system. There's a specific date approaching, a date buried in the Federal Register that will trigger the next leg up. You need to be fully positioned before that date. Let's wrap this up. Let's look at the end game. This is the end game. We have covered the trigger, the Supreme Court ruling, the mechanism, the tariff shock, and the threat, the bail-ins. Now, I'm going to give you the timeline. I'm going to tell you exactly when the trap snaps shut. You do not have a year. You do not have 6 months. You have exactly 30 days from the moment those tariffs go into the Federal Register to the moment the enforcement begins at the ports. Mark this window on your calendar. This is the twilight zone. This is the period where the old rules still technically apply, but the new reality is already here. This is the period where you can still move money, where you can still find inventory, and where you can still exit the banking system without triggering a red flag. But once that 30-day window closes, the supply chain freeze hits. On day 31, the first cargo ships will be turned away or impounded for non-payment of the new duties. On day 35, the factories in the Midwest will announce temporary shutdowns due to lack of parts. On day 40, the shelves at Walmart and Home Depot will start to look thin. And on day 45, the panic becomes general. That is when the average person, the one who doesn't watch this channel, the one who trusts the news, will rush the stores. That is when the gas lines start. That is when the ATM limits drop to $100. If you are trying to buy silver on day 45, you are too late. You will be standing in line with the mob, holding worthless paper, begging for an asset that is already gone. The $85 price we are seeing today is the market discounting this future. The market is telling you that in 45 days, silver will not be available at any price in fiat currency. But there's one final piece of the puzzle, the piece that makes this a controlled demolition and not just an accident. Watch what the Federal Reserve does when the supply chain freezes. They will not fix the supply chain. They cannot fix it. Instead, they will offer a solution to the chaos. They will introduce the central bank digital currency, CBDC. They will say, the banking system is unstable and cash is inefficient. To ensure you get your stimulus checks and your tariff relief payments, you must sign up for the new FedNow digital wallet. This is the trap. The CBDC is the digital cage. It is programmable money. It is money that can be turned off if you buy the wrong things. It is money that expires if you don't spend it fast enough. The move to physical silver is not just an investment. It is a vote against the digital cage. It is the only way to retain your financial sovereignty when the entire system goes digital. When you hold a silver eagle, you hold a battery of uncancelable value. You hold the ability to transact privately, peer-to-peer, without a QR code, without a social credit score, and without permission. The Supreme Court ruling was the demolition charge. The tariffs are the explosion. The CBDC is the prison they build in the rubble. You have a choice. It is a binary choice. You can stay in the system, hope for a bailout, and accept the digital shackles. Or you can become your own central bank. You can secure your labor and your legacy in the only asset that has survived every empire collapse for 5,000 years. The math is absolute. The debt is unpayable. The isolation is legal. The inflation is inevitable. Stage 4 is here. The credits are rolling on the American empire's financial dominance. But for you, this can be the beginning. This can be the moment you secured your family's future for generations. The pattern has played out. The warning has been delivered. The rest is up to you. Subscribe to the channel right now because in the next video, I'm going to reveal the list of safe jurisdictions. I am going to show you the 3 specific countries that are not implementing CBDCs, the countries where property rights are still absolute and where the smart money is buying their Plan B real estate. If you think moving your money to silver is the final step, you are wrong. It is only the first step. You need a location that will treat you like a client, not a subject. I am Economy Meet History. The history books are being written right now. Make sure you are the author of your own chapter, not just a footnote in someone else's tragedy. Get your medals, get your privacy, get ready. I'll see you in the next video.